We're the general contractor on this job, and this job, money-wise, is about a 50-50 deal. We did 50% of it as our own forces, and we did the site work and the water transmission line. And we were excited to do this because this is the first type of project like this, even though the components of the construction were the same and very familiar for us as far as doing the earthwork embankments and the utility construction. We're very fortunate to have Nat Gunn and DN Tanks know and be able to construct the tank to where we didn't really do that. So we were really the prime contractor with a subcontractor that was almost essentially a prime contractor in themselves. Hopefully today we'll leave here with a better understanding of how the general contractor goes through this process, through the bidding and the planning, and we'll talk about some scheduling, and then we'll get into the meat of the project of what we do and handle the weather issues and the other actual construction issues that we face to do a project of this magnitude. Like most reputable contractors out there, we like our reputation. We like to think that we're the best at what we do, but we also like to play in the dirt and have a good time doing it. And being a good business, we have to make a profit so that we can go to the next job and do that as well. Our primary goal is to help the client get the services and build their project on how they want it to perform. And we're very accommodating and really want to do that. If we want to be here next year and want a recommendation from the engineer and continue to be in business 25 years like we have, we want to give a good product. So we'll go through a little bit of the bidding on how we approach our bidding. And basically, we do, just as you see here, we'll review the plans and we decide whether we want to bid a project on whether it fits our scope, how much the project cost is going to be, on whether we can finance some of the construction costs, whether our bonding company will support us in what we do, and see where we're at in our scheduling with our crews. Do we have available equipment to do this job on time? And then if so, then we go through and we order the plans and we review the plans so that we can aggressively go after the project like that. When we review the plans, we get the plans and we like to go out to the site and obviously see what we got. I mean, when you get the plans on paper, looks pretty good. Oh, you run a water line and you build a tank, no problem. You get to the site and you got a narrow 12-foot driveway, you got trees over here overhanging this, you got a state highway with cars just zooming by and about to run you over, and you think, well, okay, here we go. So you take that into consideration and you take that back and you go back to the shop, and then you start to quantify the scope of your work and you decide, well, okay, we've seen it on plans. We've got a material list. We'll send it off to the suppliers. We got to bid this in a week. We better get the midnight oil going because the suppliers are going to wait till the last minute to give us our material list. And then we review the specifications there a little bit. And in the specifications, Pat talked about how we get a book this thick and we got to read through that book. And in the industry, there's a lot of things that happen the same over and over again, but then there's certain utilities that they may want to use a Mueller fire hydrant, they may want a Kennedy fire hydrant, or there may be other specialties in there. In this situation, it's specified in the specifications of the tank builders that we're allowed to use to actually build the tank. So we look at those and review those specifications, and we take that into consideration when we call our suppliers and ask for the type of materials to make sure that we're getting the right materials. One of the biggest issues with some of these loans and some of these public bids is mechanical fittings just for water lines, whether it be domestic or an import, and that can significantly change the price of your bid. So after we review the specifications and we quantify the scope of work that we got on hand, and we've looked at the plans, and then we kind of look at the contingencies that are at. Based on our site visit, we'll get to that and some other construction issues of rock, water, how tight the site is, easements, any permits we may have to apply for. And then we calculate what kind of production can we get doing this job. We can build this tank. How long is it going to take us? What kind of crew? How many people? How fast do we got to get it done? And we calculate that, and we take the specifications, take this all under consideration. We try to summarize this and come up with the best. It's not really an estimate, it's a guesstimate at this point. And we calculate these and we put it in the bid documents that Pat talked about earlier. And some of it is we have to call our bond company and we have to get a bid bond and a performance bond to know that they'll back us, which is usually generally required in a public document. We fill out the Form 96 Form 96 is generally a form that the public bids use, and it's a standard form that most bid openings use in a public standpoint. We put our bid together, we dot our I's, and we cross our T's, and we put it in an envelope, and you never seal it because before you get to the bid, something will change, somebody will call, they'll say, well, this is lower, we can do it for this price, or no, you got the wrong materials there, you need to adjust that. So a runner will be out in a truck and he'll be making these changes as Pat had talked before. Just things are always last minute and someone's always afraid that somebody else is going to have an advantage that they don't have, and so nobody wants to give up they don't want to play their card until the last minute. And that makes it for a hectic bid day, and bid days get very, very exciting, very nervous. And then you go to the bid day and you're there amongst your competitors, and you've seen them every day, and every bid time you go there, you shake hands, you talk, ask how things are going, and it's pretty civil at that point. And then the bid openings, and you start to read the bid openings and you find out, and my professor at Purdue always said there's never a good bid day on bid day. You open the bid and, well, I'm low bidder. What did I leave out? You know, can we get this job done for that? And that's the kind of things you're doing it. And if you come in second place, you're like, how in the world did that guy do that for that? Or you're thinking, well, I wish we were just a little bit more aggressive because I think we could have done it for that. But fortunate enough, Reed & Sons was able to get this job. And we were the low bidder, and we were very excited to have this job. So that brings us on to the planning and scheduling. And we go into the planning. And now that we have the job, we got to figure out, okay, was our guesstimate right? How are we going to do this job? So we have the engineer usually sets up a meeting at the pre-construction meeting that he talked about earlier, and the owner and the engineer's there, and we get to meet the engineer's representative, and we tell them, this is how we plan on doing the job, here's our schedule, this is what we'd like to do. And then we listen to the owner's response on if they have any concerns or conditions or what their intent, and get a feel for them so that we can kind of customize the project and give them their spin on it so that we can complete it on budget, on time, where we can still make some money and come back and do another project at a later date. So we do that, and we look at the time of completion, which is September on this job, and we always try to build a fluff in there. And on this particular job, we started in January, and we're on some steep slopes, and looking at that, so we knew that starting in January that weather was going to be an issue, and there are some time constraints, and that had to be adapted into the schedule. So we looked at the size of the crew. This particular job was pretty small, so we can't throw 100 guys out there and throw it out in 1 week. It's pretty much a 2-3 man job, kind of work your way through the goat pass and cover up your tracks as you go. When we get out there, you'll see that there's a house that uses this driveway on a daily basis, and we had to accommodate getting him. We have an adjacent landowner where the property was acquired that we had to finesse and work around him and accommodate him as well. So all this had to be considered in planning. We submitted our materials, the type of materials that we're going to do. We give cut sheets of the materials that we're going to use, whether it be a Mueller fire hydrant or whatever, and we submit this to the engineer for approval. He looks through the spec books, and the owner looks through it to make sure that we're using the materials that Doug prefers. You know, I mean, sometimes you get certain meter sets or whatever, and you don't want this meter or this meter, and then have to have parts or wait on parts. And you take that in consider time if there's any special items. This one had an altitude valve, and it has a lead time of like 7 to 8 weeks to get the altitude valve to put in there. And you have to take that into consideration when you're doing this planning to make sure you can complete the project. The altitude valve is one of the last things that we're going to do. However, if we wait to order that altitude valve at the end, we're supposed to have the job done, but wait, we got to wait 10 weeks to get this valve, so we're not going to get done on time. We're not going to do anything for 10 weeks. We're just going to sit there and wait for the valve to get here. So that usually don't work out too well. But then we go into scheduling. Part of the planning is the scheduling process. Pat, if you could go ahead. And in the scheduling, we look at the crews and the equipment available. And sometimes these jobs hit, you're looking for work, and you're always looking for work, and you're trying to plan it out, and you wish you had a continuous pipeline. But as it works out, we didn't quite finish the last job. We're working 10-hour days trying to complete it, and we need a backhoe for this job. Well, do we rent? Do we get one? Do we move some other jobs around? And that all goes into the scheduling and availability. I'm kind of the low man on a totem pole. We're a small owner-operator. My best friend that I've known since second grade is the vice president, and he's our site superintendent. He generally runs the crews. His younger brother is the president. One of us three handles what goes on in our company, and all three of us know what the other guy's doing. So we're always fighting tooth and nail, saying, no, that's my backhoe, no, that's my backhoe. I'm taking it to my job. No, you can't have that. And we're just like family and friends fighting amongst ourselves, and at the end of the day, we see who ends up with what. Well, then we coordinate all this with our subcontractors. They're going through the same problems that we have with scheduling. They got this crew over, whether it be in Saudi Arabia, which we've never personally had that problem, but that gun goes through with that. They're all over the world, and it was just amazing to see some of their superintendents come in and do that job, and so now we have to coordinate that. Our suppliers, like I said, the altitude valve, we have to call the company that makes that, get that on order, and say, hey, we need this by such and such date. We call our suppliers. This particular job is off of a driveway off of State Road 46 in Bartholomew County, just across Brown County. Well, now we got to tell our suppliers who comes from Indianapolis, who have street names and signs, and they want to know how to get to rural downtown Bartholomew County in the middle of nowhere. X marks the spot. So, so we get that done and we schedule that, and now we have all that scheduled and we're ready to go. Well, we mobilize, we got equipment there, we got crews there, it's Monday, we're ready to go. Guess what? It's raining, we're on steep slopes. Boys, let's go home today. We'll try her again tomorrow. So you take the weather issues and the time of the year. Our contract started in January. We had a pre-construction meeting in January, and between the owner and the engineer and ourselves, we pretty much that January and February, if we got anything done at all, we'd be lucky. That was in the original plan. That was kind of decided even before we bid that that's kind of the way it was going to go. There's some substantial earthwork on this project, and you just can't move mud. You dig up dirt and you put it in a pile, it gets rained on, it turns to mud, and it just kind of flattens itself out. We all know how that goes. So the length of the day is short, it's cold, frost in the morning, sun in the afternoon. We got guys that's been laid off, anxious to work, trying to feed their families, working 1 or 2 days, just begging to go to work. And you're trying to weigh all this in on, you still got to maintain your quality of the product you're trying to deliver. At the same time, you want to be productive enough that you're making money doing this. And then at the same time, you want to be loyal to your workers, and part of your quality goes by maintaining your workers. Well, if you're starving that guy out, he's going to go work for somebody else. So you got to balance all this, and the weather doesn't help, especially in January and February. By the time March come around, we had a couple snows. I think we're averaging 2 or 3 days consistently working, and some days we're just making it happen. Some days you just lose money just to make it happen. We wanted to start with the road bore, and then we end up with the water line. At the bottom of the hill there's water. On the top of a steep slope there's just rock sitting on top of the ground, so there's all kinds of different things that you're fighting. Wet, dry, water table at the top, dry at the bottom, steep slopes, cold, hot. Some guys like to work in the cold, some don't. which that brings on to the other construction issues. And I just kind of touched a part of them. And, you know, we always start off the job calling locates, and there's our friendly guy representing call 811. I kind of like that picture myself. That was pretty nice. And then this is at the top. This picture at the bottom was at the top of the hill. All those utilities are underneath that tank. That's not true, but I've never seen anything like that, but I'm glad I haven't, because I don't know how you'd possibly build anything around that. But those are things that are underground, and sometimes it's unknown, unforeseen. The engineers usually do a good job with the available resources that they get to mark the existing utilities on the plans, which they have to be accounted for when you're doing these projects. Well, you know, you bid it a certain way and you count for what you see, and we called locates here in this particular job, and we get out to State Road 46 where we're going to jack and bore under the highway, and we knew we had 2 water lines and we knew we had some communication lines. But after the marks were located, we have some more communication lines. We have a major fiber optic that is a data supply line from Columbus to Nashville, and guess what? They directional bored that, and nobody knows how deep it is or where it's at. So that took a lot of potholing just to find it. And State Road 46 sticks up about 8 feet to the relative ground on one side, which is kind of a wetland, and the other side is the driveway with some trees and some fence that we had to accommodate. And to get this jack and bore was nonetheless tight and very constrained, and presented some challenges for us. And then it didn't help that our boring machine was on another job in State Road 37. We were doing a bore that we had borings provided to us that showed no rock. We're from Bloomington. We knew there was rock. However, we couldn't bid it that way or we wouldn't receive the job, and we were advised to bid it as shown. There was a unit price for rock in this particular situation, so we get the bore started, and instead of being a dirt bore that was supposed to take a week, it's a rock bore that's going to take 4 weeks. So now we don't have our machine to come over to this job and do it on time. Halfway through the rock bore, our machine breaks down. The only part that's available is in Italy, 2 weeks delivery time. Lucky us. There's just other delays that come into the schedule and other construction issues that you have to deal. We carried on with running the transmission line up the steep hill, and as Pat said, it goes up a driveway alongside the driveway, and we had to maintain traffic on that driveway. I mean, it's just one person living in a house. That wasn't too hard to do, and that person was very nice and actually helped us out a lot. And we didn't really acquire any man-made structures or abandoned pipes. There's a telephone line that is kind of neat when the locator locates it, and the telephone line's laying on top of the driveway because they couldn't bury it because it's rock. And you know, there's about 4 or 5 different phone lines where they've run it up there at different times that's frayed and sticking out there, and the locator's actually painted each one of those that you can obviously see are disconnected, and he's painted them orange to let you know that there's a broken telephone line there. Rock, we knew that there was going to be rock on this, but we didn't know what kind of rock. This part of Bartholomew County and Brown County and surrounding, you got shale, you got hard limestone, you got a water table, you got sand, you got just about any kind of condition you could possibly have, and I think this site had them all. We had dewatering on one side of the bore, we had clay on the other side of the bore. I don't think we hit any sand, but then we had some rock and then just some wet, unsuitable soils. So the rock was the biggest, and I think that's where we had an advantage on getting this job, is the rock borings showed that there was going to be rock, that the tank was going to be in 5 foot of rock, and we kind of took a contingency and a gamble that we could have a big enough machine that this rock, this shale, we could actually dig it. And the good thing is we were right. So that's working out for us pretty well. That pretty much sums up our process on how we went through and the type of construction that we did. We basically dug a hole, got the tank site ready, we ran the water line up there, and we have all that ready. And even though we're the prime contractor, now I turn it over to Dan and let Nat Gun, they're going to build you a nice concrete water tank and show you how it's done. So I think with that said, I think that's about it.